It had been years since we parted ways. Life had moved on, or so I thought. Then, one quiet evening, my phone buzzed. Message appeared. From her. My heart skipped a beat, and a cold wave of unease washed over me. I hadn't heard from her in years, and yet here she was, reaching out with just a few simple words. Words that shattered the fragile peace I had built for myself. I stared at the screen, unable to type, unable to think. Every memory, every unresolved argument, every regret from the past suddenly came rushing back. How could one message, one line of text, change everything I had worked so hard to leave behind? And why now, after all this time? In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to take you through the moments leading up to that message. The emotions it triggered, the shocking truths it revealed. Truths that I never expected, and that forced me to face my past in ways I wasn't ready for. Before we dive in, if you love real, emotional, suspenseful stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. I had thought life after our separation would be simple, quiet, peaceful, a chance to finally breathe without the constant tension that had filled our home for years. At first it was like that, tempting, yes, but strangely comforting. I threw myself into work, long walks, and late-night drives, trying to fill the silence with anything that kept my mind busy. Friends asked how I was doing, and I would smile, nod, tell them I was fine. They didn't see the nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was thinking of me too, or if she had moved on completely. The first few months were the hardest. I kept replaying our fights in my mind, the words that cut deeper than anything else, the silence that followed. Even after years, those memories were vivid. I would catch myself looking at my phone, almost expecting a message from her, even though I knew she had stopped reaching out. Told myself it was just a habit, a residue of our past. But deep down, a small part of me still longed for closure, or maybe a simple sign that everything was really over. Gradually, I started rebuilding. I painted the walls of my apartment, rearranged furniture, bought plants I could actually keep alive this time. I even started cooking again, something I hadn't done since she left. It was as if every small step was an attempt to reclaim a life I had forgotten how to live. Friends noticed a change in me. They said I seemed lighter, less burdened. But no one could see the subtle ache, the quiet emptiness that lingered even when I smiled. I began dating again, cautiously, like a man tiptoeing around a fragile glass sculpture. Nothing serious, just casual dinners and coffee dates, but even those felt foreign. Heart had grown hesitant. It was as if a part of me had been locked away, the part that once believed in love without conditions, without arguments, without heartbreak. And still, every night, I would go to bed with a mind crowded with memories of laughter, of fights, of moments that could have been different if only we had understood each other. Then came the day that changed everything. I was sipping coffee on my balcony, the morning sun cutting across the city skyline, when I heard the familiar ping of my phone. At first, I didn't think much of it, probably just a notification from work or a promotional message. But when I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. It was her. Her name, right there, in bold letters. My fingers froze. My heart raced, and for a moment, the years melted away. The message itself was simple, short, almost casual. We need to talk. Those words hit harder than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just a message. It was a reminder of everything I thought I had left behind, a doorway to a past I had tried so hard to lock away. I sat there, staring at the screen, unsure whether to open it, whether to respond, or whether to just let it sit there and pretend it never arrived. My mind started racing. Why now? After all these years, why reach out? Was it regret? Was it a warning? Or something far more complicated that I wasn't ready to face? Memories flashed her last conversation, the bitterness in her voice, the way she left without a backward glance. And yet, beneath all of it, a flicker of curiosity, and something I couldn't name, pulled me toward replying. I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever feel normal again. The quiet life I had built after our separation was about to be disrupted, and there was no turning back. Something about that message, something in the way those 3 simple words were typed, demanded my attention. My past had come knocking, and this time I couldn't ignore it. And so, The journey began, one that would confront the memories I buried, the truths I avoided, and the person I had become in the years since we parted. I didn't know what I would find, but deep down, I sensed that life as I knew it was about to change forever. I stared at her message for what felt like hours, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The screen glowed softly in the dim light of my apartment, reflecting a mix of fear, curiosity, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this message wouldn't be the reopening of old wounds, but the closure I had always longed for. My heart raced with every second, and yet a part of me resisted. After all, this was the woman who had left me, who had shattered the life we built together. Why would I risk that peace now? Finally, with a trembling hand, I typed a short reply. Okay. When do you want to talk? My thumb hovered over the send button for a second longer than necessary, as if hesitating could somehow prepare me for what was coming. Then, with a small click, I sent it into the digital void, not knowing if she would respond immediately or if she even wanted to. The reply came within minutes. Tonight, can you come by? That simple sentence sent a jolt through me, a mix of anxiety and anticipation that made my chest tighten. Tonight, that was only hours away. I had time to second guess, to plan my words, to prepare for the confrontation that awaited me. But deep down, I knew that nothing could prepare me for the truth she was about to share. The hours dragged on slowly. Every small sound in my apartment seemed amplified. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the distant car horns from the street below. I paced back and forth, trying to distract myself, trying to convince myself that I was ready, but my mind refused to cooperate. Memories of our past flooded in her laughter, echoing through the halls. The fights that ended with slammed doors, the quiet nights when everything felt too heavy to bear. When the evening finally arrived, I left the apartment with a careful calm I didn't feel. The city streets were quiet, almost serene, but my thoughts were chaotic. Every step toward her house felt like walking into a storm I couldn't control. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would react, but the words never stayed in my mind for long. Instead, a cold knot of anticipation sat in my stomach, tightening with every passing second. I reached her door and hesitated. I could see the soft glow of light seeping through the curtains, hear faint movements inside. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock. Just as I did, the door swung open, and there she was, older, softer, yet carrying the same intensity in her eyes that I remembered so well. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, taking in the years of separation that had stretched between us like an invisible wall. She stepped aside, allowing me to enter. Her living room looked much the same as I remembered, but the air felt heavier, filled with unspoken words. I sat down on the couch, trying to appear composed, but my hands were clammy, my chest tight. She sat across from me, her eyes fixed on mine, searching, questioning. I realized then that she wasn't the same woman I had left behind. She carried her own burdens, her own truths that I had no idea about. I didn't know how to tell you, not all of it, she said softly, her voice breaking the fragile silence. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Her words began to spill, hesitant at first, then faster, revealing the events, choices, and regrets that had shaped her life after our separation. Each revelation cut through the calm I had built around myself. I listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes too stunned to react. As she revealed details I never expected, truths that made me question everything I thought I knew about our past. I realized then that this conversation was not just about hurt, it was about both of us, the decisions we had made, and the consequences we had lived with. The anger, the pain, the confusion, they were all still there, swirling beneath the surface, but now they mingled with understanding, empathy, and a strange sense of closure that had always eluded me. By the time the night ended, I was exhausted, emotionally raw, and yet oddly lighter. I had come expecting confrontation, maybe even confrontation disguised as catharsis. What I got was something far more complex, a mixture of pain, reflection, and the beginning of understanding. And as I walked back to my apartment in the quiet of the night, I knew that whatever came next, my life had been irrevocably changed by this unexpected message. The days following our conversation felt surreal. I kept replaying her words in my mind, the truths she had finally shared, the confessions I never thought I'd hear. Every detail, every hesitation in her voice, seemed to echo louder than the last. I tried to focus on work, on my routines, but nothing could drown out the weight of what she had revealed. Her message, her visit, had pulled the past right back into my present. And for the first time in years, I felt like a man standing on the edge of old memories, unsure which way to step. Then came the follow-up message. A simple line that shattered my fragile sense of control. There is something more you need to see. Can we meet again? My stomach tightened instantly. More. I had survived the first confrontation, the first wave of revelations. Could I handle another? And yet curiosity clawed at me. I knew I couldn't ignore it. When I arrived at her apartment the second time, the air was thicker, charged with a tension I could almost touch. She greeted me silently, her eyes betraying the storm of emotion she tried to contain. I noticed the laptop sitting on the table, its screen dim but ominous, as though it were hiding secrets that would soon spill into my reality. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, but my hands betrayed me, shaking ever so slightly as I stepped closer. "Sit," she said softly, her voice holding both urgency and fragility. I obeyed, my eyes flicking to the laptop, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. She typed a password, her fingers trembling, and then the screen lit up, revealing folders and files that seemed to pulsate with silent menace. My chest tightened, a cold sweat forming on my forehead. This was more than a conversation. This was a confrontation with truths that had been carefully buried, waiting for this very moment to surface. She began explaining what each folder represented: decisions, correspondences, financial choices, moments of secrecy I had never imagined. Every click, every file she opened, was a revelation. And every revelation cut through the calm I thought I had rebuilt in my life. It was as though I were seeing our entire past, not just through her eyes, but through the raw, unfiltered evidence of actions and choices I had been blind to. I felt anger rising first. How could I have been left in the dark all these years? How could she withhold pieces of our lives that were so crucial, so defining? But as the hours passed, that anger began to mingle with something heavier. Sorrow, not just for myself, but for her. The sacrifices, the mistakes, the moments of desperation, it was all laid bare. And it humanized her in ways words alone never could. At one point, she looked at me, her eyes glistening. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. And in that instant, I realized that the truth she had finally shared was as much about her own survival as it was about revealing my own past. Every secret, every omission had been a defense mechanism, a shield against the chaos that our separation had unleashed. We sat there for hours, silent at times, listening to the hum of the laptop and the unspoken weight of everything it contained. I realized that life had moved on, but so had we separately, differently, scarred, but resilient. And yet, in this room, in this quiet confrontation with the past, I felt the possibility of understanding, of forgiveness, not necessarily for reconciliation, but for peace. By the time I left, the night had deepened, and the city's streets were cloaked in darkness. But inside me, something had shifted. The anger, the confusion, the hurt, they were still there, yes, but tempered by clarity. I knew that whatever I did next, the course of my life had irrevocably changed. The past had been confronted, and for the first time, I felt like I could step forward without carrying the weight of unanswered questions. And yet as I walked back to my apartment, a part of me couldn't. To shake the feeling that the most difficult choice was still ahead, how to act on the truths I had just uncovered, and how to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the one I had just discovered. The following days were some of the longest I had ever experienced. The truth she had revealed, laid bare on that laptop, replayed in my mind at every moment during work, in the quiet of the night, even in fleeting moments of distraction. Every decision I had made since our divorce suddenly felt inadequate, as if I had been walking through life blindfolded, while the map of our shared past was now in my hands. The weight of choice pressed down on me harder than I expected. I kept thinking about her vulnerability, the way her eyes had pleaded for understanding, and the raw honesty that had shattered every carefully constructed wall I had built around my heart. Part of me wanted to retreat, to lock the past back in its box, and pretend none of it mattered. But another part, a deeper, almost stubborn part, knew that ignoring the truth would be worse than confronting it. I had a decision to make, and it wasn't going to be easy. I went over the details again and again. The messages, the emails, the secret notes she had kept, all of them pointed to a side of her I had never understood. The mistakes she made weren't malicious. They were human, flawed, but deeply significant. And I realized that my next step would define not just how I remembered her, but how I remembered myself. Could I forgive her mistakes? Could I accept the version of our life that had been hidden from me for so long? One night I called her. My voice trembled slightly, though I tried to mask it with calm. "We need to talk," I said, not needing to elaborate further. She didn't respond immediately, and the silence stretched, almost like a test. Then finally she spoke. "Shh, I'm ready." And in that single word, the possibility of closure, understanding, or even redemption began to take shape. When we met, the air was thick with unspoken tension. The city lights outside reflected in her eyes, shimmering like fragments of memory we couldn't retrieve but could acknowledge. I took a deep breath, allowing myself to be fully present in the moment instead of retreating into the past. We didn't start with apologies. Those would have been hollow. Instead, we started with the facts, revisiting every revelation, every truth that had come to light. As we spoke, I realized that confrontation didn't have to mean conflict. Her voice, steady now, but still tinged with emotion, explained motives, fears, and regrets I had never considered. I listened without judgment, even as memories of hurt surfaced. And slowly, the anger that had gnawed at me began to soften, replaced by something I hadn't expected: empathy. The woman before me was not the enemy of my past, but a complex human being who had navigated her own storms, just as I had navigated mine. By the end of that conversation, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't unscathed. How could I be after everything I had learned? But I was no longer trapped by uncertainty or betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt a measure of clarity. I knew that some wounds would leave scars, that some truths would never fully erase the pain. But I also understood that the future didn't have to be defined by what had happened before. Leaving that meeting, I realized that my choice wasn't about reconciliation in the traditional sense. It was about deciding whether to carry the burden of resentment or to release it, to allow both of us the freedom to continue living without being chained to past mistakes. And in making that choice, I found a quiet, almost surprising strength. As I walked home, the night air felt lighter, less suffocating. I understood now that the most difficult decisions are not always about action, they are about acceptance. Acceptance of reality, acceptance of another person's humanity, and acceptance of your own limits. And in that acceptance, I finally found the peace I had been searching for all these years. Though the journey wasn't over, there were still tough conversations ahead. And there would always be moments when the past whispered I knew one thing for certain: the power of truth, when met with courage and compassion, could transform even the deepest wounds into a foundation for a life lived without regret. As I sit here reflecting on everything, I realize that life doesn't give us clear answers or easy resolutions. Sometimes the people we thought we knew best reveal truths that shake us to our core. Sometimes the pain lingers long after the moment has passed. But what I've learned through all of this is that clarity and peace come from avoiding the truth. They come from facing it, understanding it, and choosing how we let it shape us. I don't know what the future holds for us, whether we rebuild a connection, walk separate paths, or simply carry the lessons forward, but I do know this: holding on to anger or regret only prolongs the suffering. Choosing empathy, even in small moments, gives us a chance to heal. Choosing understanding gives us the freedom to live without being chained to the past. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's that no matter how dark or confusing things may feel, the courage to face the truth and the willingness to grow from it can change everything. Life is messy. Emotions are complicated. But we always have the power to decide how we respond. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with me. If this story moved you, inspired reflection, or gave you a new perspective, please hit the like button. And if you want more real emotional stories that make you think, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Comment below if you've ever faced a truth that changed everything in your life. I'd love to hear your story. Let's connect, reflect, and grow together.